Helps to unmute the mic, I figured out. Anyway, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the programs. Our Let Us Study Together channel. This is the place for serious Bible study for serious Bible students. And this month we are talking about national adoption. Making this a choice for people for unexpected pregnancies and situations like that. But first, I want to tell you about an affiliation I have. I am now an ambassador for 7 Weeks Coffee. And how did 7 Weeks Coffee get their name, you ask? Good question. Because at 7 weeks, the human embryo is approximately the size of a coffee bean. And they have, since their founding, donated over $1 million to pro-life causes, to some 1,000 pro-life organizations. And so I'd like to give them a shout out. 7 Weeks Coffee, give them a try. Enter code Cordal 2013 for 10% off your first purchase. Now, for November, we're talking about National Adoption Month and talking about the choice of adoption. It's an important choice. It's one that really needs to be considered, and there's a lot that goes into choosing adoption. Now, one figure I have seen but have not really been able to verify with a reliable source is that approximately 40% of white adopted parents have at least one child who is of another race. And I happen to be one of those parents. My wife and I have an adopted daughter who is Black, as you can see. This is one of our recent Christmas pictures. And joining me here in a pre-recorded interview, I have another family that has adopted a sibling group. Now, when you get into adoption, there's a big learning curve to begin with, but when you cross racial lines, there's an even bigger learning curve. You have to pay attention, in our case, to things like hair care and skin care and that sort of thing, and whether or not you know anything about the child's heredity, which can happen regardless of the racial situation. And you have to keep your eyes open for various issues that could crop up. Well, I sat down last week and I had a talk with Eric Floyd. He and his wife adopted a sibling group of 3 boys from a state adoption pool. And in this conversation, we also touched on adopting older kids who have memories of their birth family. Now, I happen to know him because I succeeded his father as the minister where I currently preach. And so as we get into the discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment on these videos. Tell your friends about it. Check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support the work on the channel, and my weekly publications on Substack. And now we will go ahead and roll the film, and I'll be back afterwards with some concluding remarks. So let's roll the tape. Episode of our afternoon coffee and conversation dealing with National Adoption Month. This is episode 4. Actually, I'm going to combine episodes 4 and 5 a little bit. We will be recording this, obviously, and we're going to deal with 2 subjects. We're going to deal with adopting children who are older, plus we're going to cover transracial adoption. And my guest joining me today is Eric Floyd. Eric and I have known each other a couple of years now. His father was my predecessor here in Danville, Illinois, where I'm preaching, and we both are going to have some expertise on this because we both have adopted transracially. So welcome to the program, Eric. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
So if you would give us just a quick bio. Oh, excuse me. Just a quick bio about yourself and your family and.
Sure. My wife Shannon and I have been married for almost 10 years now. We live in the suburbs of Toledo, Ohio. I work in information technology. My wife works as a college administrator, and probably early 2020, we started talking seriously about expanding our family. Natural childbirth wasn't going to be an option for us with some health issues that were going on. So we explored what that would look like for us and our family, and ultimately landed on adopting out of a foster care system. And so we have three sons that we brought home in 2022. Officially adopted them in August of that year, brought them home around Memorial Day. Um, and it's been a whirlwind ever since.
Especially with three of them. For me, it's enough of a whirlwind with one. Uh, so, how did you? They were from Florida, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, how did you in Ohio get hooked up with a sibling group from Florida?
Well, what we did is we worked with a local agency here in our area called Adopt America Network, and they helped us with everything from just getting licensed to be able to adopt, to working with different agencies around the country. So, um, as people may not be aware, the foster care system is very fragmented. Every state is separate, and in some cases, like in Ohio, every county is independent from each other. And so there's not a lot of national searching that goes on. There are some sites like adoptuskids.com that we've used, um, but nothing is complete. So that agency helped us in that they could search nationwide. They have different contacts around the country, and they were able to find children that met our qualifications because they do a questionnaire and they ask what you're able to parent, what you're looking for, etc. And they would send us matches that they were finding that they thought would be a good fit for us, and then we could decide if we wanted to go further and inquire about them and so on. And then that opened up the conversation. So when we did that, we didn't really put any limitations on where the children were coming from, and so ultimately they found our boys in Florida.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you know, my daughter was born in Florida, and that's how she got her name. She was born on Amelia Island, and long story short, that was the only girl's name we could agree on. So that's how she got her name. Now, you mentioned licensing. Did you what kind of licensing did you have to go through in order to do it?
It's because we were choosing not to foster. We were choosing to go adoption only. It was I'll say slightly less intensive than fostering, and it's probably 95% the same sort of thing. We had to take all of the classes for, CPR. We had to have all of the checks from the fire department coming in to inspect that we had an escape plan and that we had ladders in all the rooms and smoke detectors and all that. All the way down to they actually asked for my mother-in-law who lives with us. They asked for her college transcripts. So it was
Really?
a fairly invasive
That-
check.
That's
Um,
fairly thorough.
yeah. Um, apart from all the, FBI and BCI and all those checks just to make sure that we're not predators or anything,
Right.
nefarious. Um, the only thing we didn't have to do really was have different sets of clothes for different types of children that you would have to keep on hand if you were going to foster.
Hmm.
You need to keep certain things on hand for those situations. So that was about the only difference. It was effectively like being licensed to foster. We just didn't have to go the full little extra you do.
So you had to have the fire department come in and give you an inspection?
Yeah, yeah. And I
That
don't
was
know if that's an Ohio thing or if that's a national requirement, but yeah, and it was simple. We just called the local fire department. They sent out they have a guy that does that, and he just kind of makes sure that your smoke detectors are working, that you have CO2 detectors that are working, and that you have a fire escape plan that's posted for everyone to see so that, in the event, people have at least something to guide them.
Now, it's been, a day or two since we adopted, but in Florida, we had to have a fire escape plan like you're talking about, but the representative from our agencies looked at it and approved it. We didn't have to have the fire department come in. Yeah, that sounds like it might be either in Ohio or maybe your specific county thing that you have to do. But the fire escape plan and having it posted, that seems fairly common across the board because we actually started our process in a couple of different states and had some, I call it false starts. Until we ended up in Florida. But the fire escape plan, the background check, they did tell us they would have to background check any adult in the house. And
That's
so,
true.
but going for your mother-in-law's transcript, I mean, that's pretty. See, and I told them, I said, look, we've lived 7 years in Canada and however many states. I said, I've been checked out by so many different background agencies. I said, go for it. I said,
Yeah.
if there was anything in that tree, it would have fallen out a long time ago.
Yeah, we
So,
were in the same boat, but yeah, I think the college transcripts might have been a state of Ohio requirement, but it seemed a little much.
yeah, that sounds like it. Now, so you decided to adopt an older one. Did you have an age range in mind when you set out to adopt, or did you just one child, or did you decide you wanted three, or how did you?
So we had no children, so we went, like we like to say, we went from 0 to 3. We have no idea what it's like to parent just one child. We know nothing or all. But part of the process, at least with our agency, was there's a big kind of checklist that they have you fill out, and you the best thing I can suggest with that is to be honest with what you're looking for and what you're willing to parent and what you're capable of parenting. Um, we had always talked about we wanted to parent whatever children God wanted us to parent. You know, we're really trusting Him to put the children that we're meant to parent in front of us so that we can give them the life that they were always supposed to have. Um, so when we filled out the form, I think we put anywhere from 2 to 5 children. We did have sibling groups in mind when we were doing it, as opposed to just a single child. Um, and the reason for that is we just wanted to keep siblings together. That's sometimes it's harder to do, especially through the foster system. So we wanted to make it a point to do that. So we said I think 2 to 5 children, and we wanted them to be anywhere from 5 to I think 12, um, which we felt gave us enough time to make an impact in their life if they were on the older end of that range, and they're out of the potty training and probably in school on the other end to make it a little easier for childcare. So it was really kind of a logistical thing on that end of it.
Yeah, we when we had actually looked a little bit at older children, we decided to go ahead and try for a newborn, and we became instant parents without having to add water because she was born on Friday. They called us Sunday. We picked her up Tuesday, so it was bam, bam, bam. We fortunately were ready. We didn't have to scramble to get a crib or a changing table. We had all that sort of thing. So how long now from start to finish? How long was the? I mean, once you were matched and decided this was going to work to the time it was signed off on by a judge. What was that? How long was that?
It took a little while. We were matched in October of 21, and I think we did some Zoom calls with them because it's a little different when you're nowhere even remotely close to each other.
Yeah.
So we did some Zoom calls with them to kind of build some familiarity. At least these people aren't completely unknown to the boys. Um, and then we visited them in Florida a few times. The first time was a supervised visit with their agent. Um, I think the guardian ad litem was even there, and then their foster mother was with them. And then after that, they let us take them out for a day on our own. And then on our third visit, they let us keep them overnight for a couple nights. So we got a hotel room and just stayed with them down in Florida for a couple nights. In May or in March rather, they had us actually bring them to Ohio for their spring break week so they could see where they would be living and get some sense of that before they actually came home permanently. And then, like I said, we brought them home in May of 22, around the Memorial Day weekend. And Florida requires 90 days of that situation before you can legally adopt. So I think on day 90 they scheduled a Zoom call, and we did everything over Zoom.
So you also had to contend with COVID during that time. Did that slow things down or mess things up for you?
Well, probably a lot. Definitely in terms of the licensing process, because they would normally do in-person classes and trainings and all of that. They did have it all online at that point. So I think we started in March or April of 2020. we engaged with them. We decided to get a different house because that house is part of your home study.
Hmm.
So moving midstream would have made them start the whole thing over. So we waited till we got moved. We re-engaged with them in I think April or May of 2020, and it wasn't until the end of the year that we were officially licensed and could start looking.
Uh-huh.
So it took the better part of a year to go through that part of the process, and then just to kind of show how slow the process can be, we inquired about our boys in March of 21, and we didn't even hear back with a phone call until October.
Oh, things probably a little backed up, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, I'm trying to think. Toledo, you're right up there on Lake Erie, aren't you? Or close to Lake Erie? So,
yep,
what did they get to spend some time in the winter there before they decided to, coming
yeah.
from
They
Florida? I mean, I moved here from Florida, so and I grew up in Alaska, so I sort of knew what I was getting myself into climate wise. But how about them?
it actually worked out well that we brought them home for spring break because that was in the I think it was mid to late March, and as it turned out, we had a pretty good cold snap that week. So when we got off the plane, they of course had no coats, no nothing. They're in Florida.
Right.
So we had brought coats with us, but we didn't bring them down in our luggage. We didn't have a whole lot. We just brought carry-ons. So we had to march them, just a little bit from the airport into the parking garage. And as soon as we walked out that door, I thought they were going to wilt because it was only about 20 degrees outside. So we had to hot foot it to the car, and then we got them in their coats and got them all bundled up. And then it actually snowed briefly one day, so they got to experience their first snow while they were up here that week, which they thought was the best thing they'd ever seen.
Okay. Now, taking them to school, getting them enrolled and that sort of thing. This I want to kind of go into a little bit talking about the reaction you got from like neighbors, the school, and maybe family when they found out you were adopting not only a sibling group of older boys, but they're African American. What did the schools? So let's start with the schools. Was there any reaction from there?
Um, Nothing. I mean, it was all positive reaction. A couple of the teachers that the boys ended up having, we are still close with because they felt so strongly about how great this was that this was happening for the boys, and they loved the story. So it was an overwhelmingly positive reaction from the school itself in terms of what was happening.
Mhm. What about neighbors that live right around you there? What have they said anything or been any negative blowback or anything?
Um, I haven't heard anything negative. So right next door to us, we have a family with four children that are all kind of hovering around the ages of our boys. So they kind of had built-in playmates right there next door. Um, and our neighborhood's fairly, I guess, it's kind of transitional. There's a lot of people that have been retired for a while, and all the way down to people with young children. So we have a number of older people in our cul-de-sac, and periodically we will have neighborhood gatherings in that cul-de-sac, and they'll do food trucks and the whole thing for the whole neighborhood. And every single time we go there, they will make a point to say, "We love watching your boys out there in the cul-de-sac kicking the soccer ball and playing, and it's just great." So we've had really positive experiences with our neighbors as well.
And it sounds like you're still having some of the old-fashioned block parties. We had a couple of those in my neighborhood where I was growing up. I think those are a great idea, but nobody does them anymore. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
they
can
aren't.
help, I think, in situations like this. Now, when we found out, I got to silence this. Sorry about that, that I have forgot to silence my cell phone. Uh, and that's one of the first rules of speaking or anything is tell people to silence the cell phones. Um, when we brought our daughter home, I called some family members, and one relative was, I'll say, cool about it. I'm going to be a little bit vague here just to protect identities. Another relative I called was excited about it. And then it dawned on me when I got off the phone that one of the relatives had a relationship with some transracial kids. The other one didn't. But yet, when we were visiting and this relative got to hold Amelia, everything changed, even to the point making clothes
Hmm.
for her. So it wasn't so much that oh, what do you think you're doing? You got to do. It was just kind of a coolness at first, but eventually warmed up. Did family pretty well accept it right away, or get? And my family, by the way, I'm from Alabama originally. I didn't know if you knew that. So there's a little bit of that plays into my situation.
Sure. Um, it was a very positive reaction from our family as well. I think we initially just told my parents, um, and my dad was so excited he couldn't wait to start telling everybody. He wanted to tell everybody right then. Um, they spent the night memorizing the boys' names. They were looking at all the pictures we had, and then the next day we had a family gathering, and then we let the rest of the family in on the news and as they arrived,
Hmm.
and we had nothing but positive reactions to that. I do have some family members that I would say we were worried about maybe a little bit. Um, and as it turned out, we really didn't have anything to worry about. They were all very accepting and very positive in their comments about what was happening. And to this day, anyone that meets those boys loves those boys.
Well, we told family about it. Some were neutral, some were. I had one just say, "You do real," because we were older. I always tell people we were a little older than most getting into the parenting game, and my dad just said to me, "You do realize your age at this point, don't you?" And that was the only issue he raised. What was our age? Which I thought, okay, that's a legitimate
Yeah,
concern,
yeah,
given the
and
fact that we were older. But in your case, you didn't go newborn. You adopted older children, and then the one I would say to our face, everything has been very positive. And I always preface it that way because I don't know what people are saying when they get around the corner or they get in the car.
sure.
But if I don't know if you noticed any looks or stares from people. But when we first brought Amelia home, we'd go out somewhere. When she got old enough to walk, we'd be going through Walmart or wherever. The kids that we passed by would look at her and then look up at us and look at her, and you could see the wheels spinning, like they're trying. How did this happen?
Yeah,
Um, but there were a couple of times that I noticed adults that were giving us what I considered disapproving looks. And I haven't noticed it in a long time, and I rarely notice it. But did you ever get that kind of feeling that someone was looking at you like, "What do you think you're doing?" You're that kind of disapproving stare. We usually get it from our parents. That kind of a stare, like,
yeah,
"What do you think you're
yeah,
doing there?"
yeah. And it's been very interesting, and I'll frame it this way. It almost seems to be a different reaction depending on the race and gender of the person involved, at least in our experience.
Hmm.
Um, for the most part, black gentlemen are thrilled when they see us out with our boys, to the point where some of them, early on, especially when we would go out to maybe Arby's or something, they would want to buy the boys a treat. And they were very pleasant and positive and excited to see us out with them. It would more often be the women who would kind of sometimes either be hot or cold,
Hmm.
very positive, or we would get a little bit of a side eye or that look you were talking about, where what do you think you're doing?
Hmm.
Um, in terms of people we know, it's even been that way a little bit, and it follows the same kind of pattern. Um, a very good friend of mine that I shared an office with was black, and he and his wife were overwhelmingly positive and actually provided a good source of support for us, kind of talking about any unique challenges that we may come to face. And we still talk with them frequently about that, even though he's retired and I don't get to see him as often. My wife has a coworker, and her reaction was, I would have rather those children stayed in the system because you're going to turn them into tan white people. So we had kind of the gamut. People that know us are more forward in what they say, but we have noticed occasional looks. I have not noticed that nearly as often lately. but early on, we definitely, I think, maybe we were just more sensitive to it early, and now it's not a not a thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we got when Amelia was a couple of days old, maybe a week or two. Debbie was at the time going. My wife was going through training to be a school bus driver, and there were several drivers in that where we lived at the time that were black. So we took Amelia in partially to show her off, but partially to ask, can you help us out here with the hair? And we had her in the little basket. We set it on the table, and everybody's oohing and awing. And then one of the drivers came. I think she was like the supervisor. Came in, and a couple of the drivers said, "Hey, come over here and see the new baby." And she walked over and she looked in, and then she like that, like and it was a black driver. And we had some questions about some things we were seeing on her skin and all that. And she recovered, I guess, and then talked to us. But I felt like the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees when that happened. And when we would go into ethnic hair care and skin places and talk to them, they were I thought pretty neutral to encouraging.
Hmm.
And probably the biggest one for me was we were in a restaurant and there was a family watching us. They had a little girl about 10. And we went over and said, "Would you like to hold her?" And the little girl sat there and said, "Yeah." So she held her. And then her dad reaches in his pocket and says, "Can I give you this dollar for her piggy bank to be the first?" And I didn't know what to say at that point. I mean, that was again, very encouraging and that sort of thing. And as she's grown, we're not seeing as much or noticing at least as much now. And we will be going into an area that is predominantly white where we're living, and I've got some concerns about that because right here where we are, I think it's about 20 to 25% African American where we're living now. So, and the one thing that when she was in Tennessee in the county where we're going for about 6 months before my father-in-law passed away. This is COVID is at its height. We're uh, dealing with all that. We had a parent-teacher conference we had to do by phone, and we got to talking, and we said something. Debbie said something to the teacher. Well, obviously Amelia's adopted, and there was this long pause, and the teacher had no idea what she was talking about because we had never met her face to face. And so she was assuming that we were black too. And then when she got over that, we went on. It was all academically fine. So we just had that little bit of surprise. Now I used to be in a group on Facebook called Transracial Adoption. It's a group that kind of imploded on itself, and we maybe can talk about that another time. But here's what I was getting at. There were some people in there, white parents, who said their kids were getting in trouble at school and being called liars because they claimed to have white parents. And I said, well, how is that possible unless you are just completely uninvolved? I mean, in other words, we're very involved with the
Yeah.
schools. And so that's probably the worst kept secret on campus at the school is our family dynamics. So I guess what I'm getting at is, are you involved enough with the schools and things that are going on there that it's no surprise that people know about your dynamics, and so they're not surprised when they see you walk in for the parent teacher conference or for ball game, basketball game, or whatever.
Oh yeah, no, we're very involved at the schools as well. So there haven't been any surprises. I think, maybe on the initial introduction, for example, our oldest moved on to junior high this year. So we had to kind of go through the introductory process, but that happened right away. So there wasn't really a big shock. We walked through a schedule. We've already met all of his teachers. We met the principal and all those people. And I mean, probably less than a week into his school year, everyone knew the dynamic.
Okay. Yeah, everyone knew ours too. Now
Yeah.
we've had to have a couple of talks with her about authority figures and about race. This gets a little sensitive sometimes, but I've told her many times that if you get called to the office for something and you get uncomfortable, you stop it and tell them to call me or mom. And I said, definitely, if there's any law enforcement, any police officer, I want you to stop it and say you don't talk to them without your parents or an attorney present. And like I said, this is a little bit of the sensitive part, but have you had any of those talks with the boys about how to behave and how to handle those situations?
Probably not quite to that extent, but we have had some conversation with them. Um, Bizarrely, from their background, they came to us fairly innocent about everything. Um, as time has gone on, we've had to have conversations around, different terms that can be thrown around and how to respond and react and what to do in those situations. Um, to, we make it clear to them on the front end, if you're in trouble at school, they know who we are, we're involved enough, we trust that they're going to do the right thing. However, if the grown-ups are not being truthful, let us know. We will help you handle that. You don't handle that on your own. You don't need to, you know, they need to work with us and let us know anything that makes them uncomfortable. And we tell them that, you know, you're going to see the doctor. No one's allowed to see these things except the doctor. You tell us if any grown-up wants to look at your bits. You tell us if anyone treats you unfairly, but you let us help you walk through that. Don't try to handle it on your own. Don't turn it into a fight. Don't run your mouth. Just get back to us, and then we'll handle it that way. As they get older, I suspect we'll have to have more detailed conversations around that. They're starting to learn more about history and different things, and that segues us into good conversations about life with them. But we're trying to take the approach of, we don't want them to be caught unaware by any situation, but we also don't want to lead the witness, so to speak, and put fear into them that maybe they don't have to have all the time, or maybe aren't old enough to burden them with yet.
And that sounds pretty close to what we've been doing. Is I've told her, look, if you have any problems at school, you tell us. I said that's part of our. My parents were never really all that involved or hands on, but I said I'm going to be more hands on. And if you got a problem, come tell us. And we've got a pretty good relationship with a couple of key people down at the school that I think we could, help us out if we got into a situation. And I've told her, here again, she's only 12, but she's already talking about getting her license, getting that first car, and all that. And I've already told her, I said, if you ever have an encounter with the police, I said, you be polite. It's yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no,
Mm-hmm.
ma'am, and then you come on home and we'll deal with it if there's a problem. I said, if you cooperate, it'll be over in a few. I've been stopped by the police. I've even had when I'm out on my walks in a new neighborhood, I've had the cops called on me, and I said, just be calm and we'll deal with it later if there's a problem. And the same thing with school. It sounds like we're both giving similar advice that if there's a problem, just be polite, keep your cool, and then we'll deal with it later, rather than digging the hole deeper and then we can't get you out of it, or it's going to be a process for us to get you out of it.
Right.
And that's kind of the way that we have been taking it now. As she and now the other thing too that we've had to kind of deal with, and I don't see it being necessarily a real problem, is my daughter. She's only 12, but she looks like she's about 19, and that sometimes people don't believe us that she's only 12, but she really is. But as they grow, are you already talking to them about things like either college or a trade or something they can go into? Because we're starting to have those discussions, and I'm partially bringing it up because I made a trip back to Alaska to see my dad when he was first diagnosed with cancer. And while I was there, I had lunch with a longtime friend of mine from high school who's also Black. And while we were talking, he just said, "Have you thought about sending her to an HBC, a historically Black college?" And I said, well, she was like 4 at the time. And I said, no, we hadn't got that far yet. And this is what he said was, growing up where he did, where he was in a small minority in Anchorage. And he said he did occasionally have some identity issues. And she, being raised by white parents, might have some of those same identity issues. And he thought an HBC might be something to help. So have you thought of in those terms, or are they still, this week wanting to be a doctor, next week wanting to be an engineer, and then something else?
We're still in those. I mean, if you ask them right now, they either want to play professional soccer or be in the WWE. There's not a lot of in between. Well, one of them wants to be a YouTuber as well. So um, we have talked to them about college a little bit, just in the sense that that's the direction we would like for them to go. We want them to make that their first choice. Obviously, trade school would be perfectly fine too. I mean, everybody's got a different path that they're gonna walk with their career, but um, so they know, conceptually that that's where they want to go. But we haven't talked anything about specifics. I think as far as we've gotten is our oldest one wants to go to the local university because I think he's more of a homebody. I think he just wants to stay near us.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, I'm sure he'll probably land on about 45 different places he wants to try to go to school.
Yeah, that's I think that's normal. I think that's perfectly normal
Yeah.
for all kids. And I was an employment specialist for a while at a school in Florida, and I told the kids, you don't have to go to a 4-year school. I'm a college graduate, and I'll tell you, it's not for everybody. And that, like, we had one young man wanted to be a truck driver, another one wanted to be a mechanic. I said, hey, great, those are, we need those
Yeah. We need
occupations.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have told Amelia, my daughter, that same thing, that if you don't want to go to college, as long as what you do is, number one, you like it, number two, it's not anything that's illegal, immoral, or fattening. And the fattening part, I said I could maybe give you a pass on that one, depending on what it is. But think about, we are Christians and we want to represent Christ. So whatever you pick, don't go open a saloon. But if you want to go into business for yourself, there are a lot of things you can do, and I would encourage that. And she has got a she hasn't met a stranger. She was always very open and outgoing. That's the word I was looking for. So I think she could do well. And I'm trying to encourage that if that's what you want to do, then to start a business, do it, right? Yeah, it's been fluctuating between architect and I think medical school and veterinarian right now. So, and like, that could change in 5 minutes. What she's
Yeah.
doing. So yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to add? We're about to the end of the program. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or before we finish up?
Um, just that it's, our experience has been a very positive one, I think, for us. We're we're happy and we're excited to see where the boys go. I mean, it's never going to be without challenges, especially when you're adopting, I think, when they're a little bit older, because, our oldest son, he remembers his birth mother. He remembers when his baby brother was born and learning to walk. Um, and so sometimes that can raise questions around, we have probably more conversations around their mom and where she's at and what her situation is. And, it's a delicate conversation in that we have to explain, your mom made bad choices. And sometimes when you make a bad choice, it leads to a consequence and it can be a permanent consequence. And that's what happened in this case.
Mhm.
And that it doesn't make her a bad person, that God loves her. God wants her to make better choices. And we pray all the time that she has a good life.
Does she get any kind of visitation, or is contact completely cut?
She lost all parental rights and has no contact at all. Florida does provide a system that we can sign in for, and we probably will at some point. That if she reached out and wanted to find out more about what was going on, they kind of do it anonymously. So they would send us, some sort of intermediary would send us an inquiry asking, what would we be willing to provide, and maybe we could send a more current photo or just a quick blurb about what they're doing, just to kind of ease her mind that they landed in a good situation, that they're having good lives. Um, and then as they get older and reach adulthood, if they really want to reconnect, we'll work with that. We're not against them having a relationship with these people if that's what they want, but we want to be careful about it because there's, as you can imagine, there's a myriad of things that could go wrong with that situation as well.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the is that the Florida Adoption Registry? Uh,
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, see, we've got to tread lightly there too. I mean, everything with us is closed at the request of the uh, the birth mother or birth parents, and so we're very careful about how we talk in terms of if it ever comes up. Now, my wife's adopted too, so she's handled a lot of the questions that come up, but it's, okay, she did what she thought was best for you. She had your best
Mhm.
interests is really the way we're approaching it, and say nothing negative about her, because we don't know anything about her. So uh,
Yeah,
I suppose, since being the information age, if she wanted to find us, she probably could, bad enough, but I think the chances are pretty slim at this point. Uh, but well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming here and talking to us here for National Adoption Month. And
absolutely.
the next episode we're going to do is I'm going to talk to an adult adoptee who was removed from her home along with a sibling, and they were both placed in the state adoption pool. And we'll be talking to her, and that will air for episode 6 in a couple of weeks. So thanks everyone for being here, and we will see you in the next episode. Be good to yourself, and if it's at all possible, be good to somebody else. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Okay. And that was my interview with Eric Floyd about his experience in transracial adoption. Just to give you a preview of coming attractions, we will be on November 20th, which is in 2 days. I'll have the interview with Lance Mosher that I was supposed to have back on November the 4th. We had to reschedule because of a family emergency that he had. So that will be in episode 7. And then after that, on Friday, November the 21st, I'll have a conversation with Kathy Carroll, who was adopted as an older child out of a state adoption pool after being removed from the home. And Tuesday, this will be interesting. November 25th at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern, I'll be live with Blair Brewer discussing abortion and abortion regrets. You want to be here for that one. And then we'll wrap it up on Wednesday, November 26th. With Home for Jolie. That's an organization that helps people to fund their adoptions. And the interview that I did with Kathy Carroll will be actually a 2-parter. We went a little long on that segment, so I'm going to break it into 2 sections. And that will be part 1 airing on Friday, the 21st. So thank you for being here. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel, comment on these videos, like them, share them. And let's not forget to give them all a thumbs up. And remember, adoption also deserves a thumbs up. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next video.